Come explore the depths of consciousness, where we raise the vibes and open minds.
Welcome to another episode of the Grounded Galactic. I am Allison,
I'm Emily.
and today we're going to be talking about one of my favorite subjects in the whole world, aliens.
She loves aliens. She loves talking about them. We're going to hear a lot about it in these episodes, and I'm going to learn some things and ask lots of questions.
That's good because I like answering questions about this part of my life because for so long I didn't tell anyone. And so now I'm like, I want to tell everyone everything and I don't care anymore what people think. It's so liberating. It's so liberating.
Our first episode, you mentioned some experiences you've had with other beings. Well, what was your first encounter? Let's start there.
My first encounter. Okay. Let's see. It was 1989 approximately. And I was about 5 years old. I remember this because it was either like right before I started kindergarten or that same year I started kindergarten. And I think, and I've heard a lot of people have had their initial experience when they were really, really young. So I don't think this is sort of out of the norm. It's just a typical night. I was in bed. We lived on a really busy road, like right on Highway 65, runs straight through Arkansas. And it was always such a pain at night when we were trying to sleep because the big truck lights would come in the windows and we were in the bedroom that was closest to the highway. So it was loud. And so our mom and dad always made absolutely sure that every night before we went to bed, because the three of us slept in that room together, they made sure that all of our curtains were closed so that we wouldn't wake up from the lights. And at that time, before the highway was expanded, we actually had a large front porch that wrapped around the full front of our house that actually had to be torn down when they expanded the highway because it was just too close. And that is a important part of this story is what was on the front porch. I get up in the middle of the night. I have to use the restroom. So I walk through the house. Everybody's asleep. I walk back. And as soon as I'm entering the doorway, the first thing I notice is that the curtain, our Snoopy curtain that were always closed, was wide open. And I was like, Mom and Dad didn't do that. There'd be no reason for y'all to get up in the middle of the night to do that. And so that was the first thing I noticed is the curtain was wide open. Very, very strange. The next thing that I noticed is that there was something in the window looking at me. So on our front porch, we had a porch swing, and behind that porch swing, situated underneath the window that faced the highway, was one of those old school wooden desks, okay? Because our mom was a teacher for years, and we just kind of had that stuff laying around. And the one that had like the seat with the built-in desktop. And sitting in that desk under the window, looking straight at me, was what only I could describe as the typical gray alien, right? What you've seen in movies on the X-Files or whatever, the large almond black eyes, the grayish wrinkly skin, very thin neck, no hair, no really distinguishable facial features other than the eyes. And it turned and looked at me and had its arms atop the top of the desk. And I just stood there in the middle of the room. Like I didn't know what to do. I didn't feel scared. I just kind of stared at it and it was completely still like a statue. And I remember thinking, I can't scream because it would wake you up, it would wake our brother up, and then I would be in trouble. And I was more afraid of being in trouble for waking people up than this thing that was looking at me. It didn't move. I didn't move. I didn't really feel like I could move anyway. I was kind of frozen there. Eventually, I did take a few steps towards the bed and got into bed. And then we had another window that faced out into the backyard, and we had a storm cellar back there that was pretty close to the window. And I just had this thought that I need to look out that window too. There's like something for me to see. So I got into bed and I peeked through the curtain and looked out the window into the backyard, and there was a ship in the backyard, and it was right in between, like it was right by the window. It was between the window and the storm shelter, which was maybe only 20 feet away from the window. And it was the shape of, I guess, your typical saucer shape. It was sitting on tripod legs and it had around its rim very colorful blinking lights. So, like red and yellow and green and white, just blinking lights all the way around it. And I would say it was about the size of the storm cellar, like the size of a large family van, not very tall, not super wide. I figure it maybe fit one of them or two of them in there. And I closed the curtain. I laid down in my bed. I pulled my covers up over my head and was kind of clenching them by my ears. And I guess eventually I fell asleep like that because the next thing I remember is opening my eyes the next morning and seeing light through my blanket and pulled my covers back down. And I just remember being so excited. I told everybody in the house. I remember thinking, like, I have the coolest story ever. And it was definitely a really, really cool experience.
Were the curtains open the next morning?
I don't remember. No one's ever asked me that. I don't remember. And honestly, I can see it in such great detail. Even now, I've thought about it every single day for the last 35 years of me seeing that ET. But I can't remember if the curtains were open the next morning because it was almost like, well, that wasn't the important thing even to remember, but at least in my little 5-year-old head. But yeah, that was my first shove into the ET world.
That was pretty jarring, sounds like. But
Uh,
you weren't scared, you said.
I definitely was not scared. I think I was more in the moment. I was just didn't know what to do. But I definitely don't remember feeling any kind of fear or anything like that other than not wanting to get in trouble. I feel like, honestly, from the other experiences that I've had where I may have been fearful in the beginning, is they have the ability to do something about that. They can help you calm down. So I would not at all be surprised that when they do approach children or those that are very young, they're going to help you kind of calm down.
Or and maybe they're intentional about choosing those to reveal themselves to who are maybe their imagination is more intact or they're more likely to believe what they're seeing is real. A child might be easy target is not the right phrase, but you get what I'm saying, might be more open to
Right.
accepting without being, super fearful, right?
Yeah. I wasn't like, oh my God, it's a monster. It's going to come in here and eat my brains. Like it wasn't anything. Anything like that. I was definitely young enough to not have those impressions of something unknown being scary. I think we kind of grow into that, unfortunately. So I'm going to ask you, you may remember this about a year and a half ago when I first started telling people online about this story. I put a video about this story on my own personal Facebook and just told the whole story and held on to it for about 2 weeks before I posted it because I'm thinking everyone's going to think I'm crazy. I don't know if I should put this out there. What if my parents or my brother, sister don't want me to talk about them at all in it, even though they were, I had all of these fears and worries. And then I just decided, no, this is a huge part of my life because I was continuing to have ET experiences and still continue to have them. And I thought there's something to this. It's a huge part of my life. I'm not going to be keeping it a secret anymore. But I remember before I posted that, I called you and our brother and our parents individually and just asked, what do you remember when I was that little about what I said to you? And y'all both remember me telling this when I was a kid. But my mom and dad, I called them separately. They were not together. Neither one of them had remembered that this ever happened. So I'm going to ask you again, because I kind of don't even remember what you said, but what do you remember when we were kids?
I mean, I can't say that I remember, the next day you telling us what you had witnessed and experienced. What I do remember is you telling that story, but I could not tell you like when I first heard it. Do you remember what Sam said?
Well,
Our brother?
Sam, our brother, yeah. When I called him, he said he remembers whenever mom and dad would have people over to play cards or whatever. They'd come over and he would remember mom and dad telling them that story and probably joking about it to their friends, but he remembers them passing that along to them.
So my big question is, what do you say to the skeptics that say you were dreaming?
I guess their opinion about it doesn't matter because it's my personal experience. I know that it happened and I have had such profound realizations from that experience and every experience after that it doesn't matter. I mean, a lot of people are skeptical about a lot of things, especially if something's never happened to them. All I can say to them is, I hope one day that when you have something that is profound to you, that you don't have people that look you in the face and say you're lying, because that can be hurtful. I don't feel hurt by that. That is one of my things that does trigger me in other scenarios, when someone is calling me a liar when I know I'm telling the absolute truth,
The assumption is that someone thinks you're lying,
or
maybe,
making it up, or like,
or misremembering.
right.
Is that as triggering if someone were to say you were a kid,
About this experience, no.
it was your imagination,
No.
not that you're making it up or that you're lying, but that, you know.
No, I just was referring to just in other general situations. If someone said, "Oh, you did this," I'm like, "No, I wasn't even there. I don't know what you're talking about." And they're just insistent that that happened or I said something. I'm like, "Show me the receipts, bro." Like, I really don't know what you're talking about, you know? So those types of things trigger me when someone I think is intentionally trying to somehow bait me. I'm a huge believer that all truths are true. And I think we've talked about this recently because there's so many different perspectives about the same thing and the same experiences, but people define them entirely different. So somebody else that may have had an exact experience like I have may come away from it thinking it's a dream. They may come away from it thinking it's their imagination. They may come away thinking whatever they want to think, or it didn't even happen, or that it was a demon, or that it was an angel, or some kind of animal. This is what my experience was. And so people can all day long come up to me and say, "You're making it up, you're crazy." Doesn't bother me.
So that happened 5 years old. Anything else in your childhood that you remember experiencing along those lines? Or was it then like later in your adult life that you started having more experiences?
The only other thing that happened to me as a kid, and honestly, this is kind of where I lose people. Because even if they think that, okay, aliens are real, and I believe people have been abducted or have had sightings or whatever, this next part, people tend to just go, "What?" And totally tend to discount everything else that I'm saying. But yes, I did have another related experience after this first one. So I would say this went on for the next 6 months or so, about half a dozen times. I would go to the bathroom. And in our house, that was the only place that you could ever go and actually be alone. So I feel like there was a reason why it happened there, because I was going to be alone. But sometimes I would just be in there, and all of a sudden, out of thin air, would appear this, and I can only describe it as a glowing green cartoon dog just in the air. And it was about the size of a weenie dog, like a dachshund, and long body and the little tail and the short stubby legs and floppy ears. And it had these concentric rings, like 3 rings around its neck and then rings around its tail. And honestly, it was very like Jetsons
I was
vibe.
gonna say, like,
It's very Jetsons
I
vibe.
was gonna look
And
up the Jetsons dog, see what it looks like.
it's not, I don't think it's green. I think it's gray or something. But anyway, yeah, it was a very Jetsons vibe. When you think about that old cartoon, the Martian dog, it kind of looked like that. And it would just appear in the room and it would kind of float around. It never touched the floor, it never touched anything. It never came through the door, went out the door. Anytime that would ever happen, I would just get this sense of, oh, they're just checking on me. They're just here checking on me. I don't remember it ever attempting to communicate with me, but I would talk to it. I even had a name for it. I called him Bernard, and I was always excited to see him. And I remember after it happened a few times, I went and told our mom about it. And that's when she was like, "Oh, you just have an imaginary friend." And then I didn't really say anything else about it after that, because I'm like, I can see how this sounds to people, even as a child, that there's a cartoon dog showing up in my bathroom. And this was not my imagination. This was as real as the dog in the next room. I mean, that I'm looking at. It was 100% real. I could reach out and touch it if I wanted to.
People that have been diagnosed with schizophrenia would say similar things. I can see the person standing there. It is so real to me. It is so real, period. What do you say to people who say this could be some type of psychosis? Sometimes a traumatic event can trigger a disassociation of some kind. Have you considered the possibility that it could be some type of hallucination from a traumatic event? And it's
That-
there to, like you said, the purpose that you felt was there to sort of make sure you're okay, almost like it's a comforting present, or you felt like it was safe, it was checking up on you. it was your friend in a way. Could that be your subconscious creating some type of imprint that you're perceiving?
I mean,
Is cool.
I will say I'm sure anything is possible, but I don't think based on the experiences that I've had throughout my life that it was. Because at this point, I've had so many that I can distinguish now between what is a dream, whether I'm lucid or not, what is an out of body experience, what's kind of happening in astral versus and then there's this sort of in between state of we're still in physical reality, but it's a little altered. I feel like I can tell the difference between all of those states and the beings that I'm meeting in those states. And it's not always when you're sleeping or in the bedroom or when it's dark outside. It's sometimes this stuff just happens in broad daylight. And again, I don't have any particular reason to argue with anybody who wants to say that I might have some type of mental illness or something like that. I've never been tested for any such thing, but
Would it change your, let's say you did. Let's just go that road for a second. Would it change your sort of outlook or your philosophy on these big topics we're going to talk about? Would it matter to you, I guess?
No, because in my mind, every experience that I've had in my life has held some meaning and has driven me in some direction that I've chosen to go in that is in alignment with my true self. So part of my path just happens to have been my spirituality has opened up because I've had encounters with beings where maybe somebody else's spirituality opened up because they've had encounters with angels, whatever they're perceiving as angels, or maybe it's been some health scare or what it doesn't really matter.
I've heard you talk about this before, but I think our audience would want to know why you. Why do you think you were contacted?
Oh boy, I don't know if that's for this episode, honestly.
Give us a short something and then we can elaborate later.
I'll give a general answer. So I think there's a lot of people on this planet that are part of certain programs that they agreed to before this life. There's a lot of people involved. A lot of people are being contacted, whether they want to admit it or not. And maybe their memories are just fuzzier. And, I do think about the little green dog. I know now from all the other experiences I've had where I've seen shapeshifting happen in the moment because of something I'm asking of them, that they can present themselves any way they want to because they're working on an energetic level where they can control their representation of their physical or non-physical self. That was what was a friendly thing to me, was a cute little green cartoon doll and not probably broad daylight. I'm sitting in the bathroom and now all of a sudden there's not like a window between me and it, like
It's a
in the first
Mothman.
encounter. Yeah, it's like right there with me, a foot away from me. I've actually talked to other people who've had experiences their whole life, and one in particular, his was like a robot. I've talked to another person, it was a clown. I think they can present themselves in whatever way.
Let's talk about your take on the possibilities of angels and demons being at play here versus interdimensional or galactic species from other planetary origin.
You're speaking on, for example, if I were to interpret it as something evil or like a guardian angel.
Right. And maybe there have been others who have had similar experiences, but maybe it is presented to them in a way that is angelic or
Sure.
demonic because that's their dominant belief system or for whatever reason.
I think and the reason why I think it's important that I had my first experience before the age of 7 is that I did not yet have my set of belief systems ingrained in me. I don't know where exactly. I'll try to find a link and link it down below the description, but there have studies that have been done about when belief systems are ingrained and at what age. And 7 years old tends to be the time that you've lived. You've gone through this 7-year cycle, and generally, whatever you're getting in from your teachers, your caretakers, your parents, your friends, whatever around you, is you tend to then become like who you are for the next however many years until you die. I think that if I had had that experience after that age, I might have interpreted it as something evil because it certainly doesn't look like anything I've ever seen on Earth, other than in a movie or a TV show. I don't know if I had seen anything on TV up to that point.
Except for the Jetsons.
Sure, the
Right.
Jetsons,
Cartoon type.
but I just remember just knowing what it was, and I didn't interpret it as an angel or demon, but I know there have been a lot of people that do. But I think that has to do with their belief systems. And again, they can present themselves in any way. So perhaps a typical gray alien can present themselves like an angel to somebody for easier communication or easier interaction. That's certainly possible.
That takes me back to something you said this episode or the last one about all truths being true. And so if that person has a similar experience as you and they believe it's an angel coming down to contact them or a demon, isn't that true?
From their perspective, sure. Whatever is true for them. That doesn't mean their truths can't change over time or they can't have realizations. Certainly, I'm sure you could think of an example in your life about how you were just so adamant about what something was or what it meant. And then something else came to light later and you were able to change your mind about it or at least look at it from a different perspective.
Definitely.
Sure. People will ask me, this tends to run in families as far as like people having experiences. And they'll say, well, what about your sister? You have a twin. Has she had any of these experiences? And I generally say, other than maybe some dreams, she hasn't at least told me that she's had any. I always will show people the birthmark that I have, which I'll show here. It's on my outside right wrist, and it looks like, to me, a flying saucer. I like to think that that's sort of like my brand. It's my mark. It's just yet another reminder of how huge this is in my life. I have very strong feelings and inclinations that within the next few years, everyone's going to know. Everyone's going to know that there are things outside of this earth. There are other beings besides humans that are intelligent that are out there, and they're going to start showing up. And people are going to be shaken to their core if they've never considered this as a possibility, or especially if they have outright completely denied it as ever being a possibility. They're really going to have to start thinking about everything that they know.
It's going to be certainly jarring for a lot. I think, though, that most people, at least most people I've talked to, hold it in the realm of possibility. And certainly the congressional hearing that they had, last summer? Summer before last?
Yeah.
Where you've got decades-long military pilots and people who are legitimately expert and have enough status that they can come and testify in front of Congress about their experiences. And they've reported seeing ships that there's no technology known to man that could create the technology or the vehicles that they're seeing. So maybe that's a glimpse of what to come, you think? That sort of information coming out.
Yeah, you've definitely had your head in the sand if you didn't know about that congressional hearing.
And, the mass media didn't cover it. It was not widely known. I only knew about it because of you and your connections with other people in the community who have had experiences and who knew that this was coming up and we should pay attention to it. But
yeah, I'm definitely going to put some links in there. You can look up David Grush and congressional hearings and probably get to it really quickly. But there are definitely some very higher up people with a lot of knowledge about this. You can check out Lou Elizondo as well. I know he's got a podcast.
I'd listened to the congressional hearing, and it seems to me pretty clear that those people who were saying that they saw these ships do not believe that what they were seeing were benevolent beings. What's your take on that?
I don't know that I necessarily had that as a takeaway. I think they're trying to balance one, wanting disclosure and wanting their own information. And their experiences maybe were different from each other because they have different vantage points. But I think in order for Congress and people to take them seriously, they might have had to slant a little bit towards it's a possible issue with defense that we need to discuss and that we are in danger somehow. So I think there was a little bit of a slant that way, but also at the same time, I don't know that they necessarily that they all feel that way. Just from other interviews and things that they've done with other people, I don't get the impression that they think that they're evil or whatever. I think they just don't know. Like they don't know. They've maybe not had any other experiences other than that.
And we all know the unknown can be scary, right? No
Sure.
matter what it is. So certainly would make sense that they might be in that frame of mind. And
from their perspective, all they know is what they saw and how their equipment did or didn't record that information or pick that up is from their military experience. They've never seen anything do that. They know that we do not have that technology. So what is it? And it needs to be talked about.
I wonder, I'm sitting here thinking, you've got experiences that you have had, and I know you've talked to many other people who have had their own experiences where they feel like they're being personally contacted versus someone's a pilot and they're in the air and they just so happen to see something. Do you think those just so happens are coincidence or accidents, or the pilot just doesn't realize that that's for them?
There's nothing that's a coincidence when it comes to extraterrestrials. They know when they're showing themselves into whom, whether it's to one person or 500 people. There are stories, and they're well documented, where two people are looking up at the same thing, and one person sees a commercial airplane and another person sees a large black cube or something. They have the ability and technology to cloak themselves as well as to present themselves to our senses in a very personal way, because they're energy masters. They can present themselves in all type of ways. They don't need propulsion systems to move their ships around. They understand that everything is here and everything is now. And the only difference between point A and point B is just the frequency signature of that geographical location. I think that they know who's going to see them, and it's just up to the person to decide, what am I going to do with this information? They're always gauging and observing what we do and what we don't do, what we say and what we don't say. Are we ready? Are we not ready?
Why do you think other species are interested in us? Why? Why?
Oh, for a multitude of reasons. There are as many agendas as there are people on this earth. I think there are some that are interested in us because, again, this is probably for a whole nother episode and we could really dig into it. People may think I'm going to go down a little bit of a rabbit hole, but you can go check out Billy Carson. He's really big in this space. Humans are genetically connected to other extraterrestrial races. There are ancestors where their ancestors kind of thing. It's like there's been genetic manipulation over eons. I mean, eons. Not, okay, humans have only been on Earth for a couple thousand years. No. Or even 10,000 years. No, there has been some form of intelligent life, whether physical or non-physical, attached to this earth since its beginning. This is kind of like an experimental space, and there's been a lot of manipulation with DNA. They're watching over us, seeing how we evolve, seeing how we grow, seeing how they can help us. And then there's also lots of other agendas of maybe ones that are more interested in our earthly resources. Maybe they're more interested in our aquatic life. There's just a multitude of interests and agendas.
I'm hearing you say you think that some may be interested in our resources, let's say. Does that mean that not every extraterrestrial species has our humans' best interest in mind? Would they just come down and extinguish us and take our resources? That's going to be a sort of common fear or mindset as more and more experiences happen. And talk to me about that.
Yeah, so Hollywood surely does not help with this image that aliens are going to come down and they just want our resources or they want to enslave us and then humanity's gone forever.
But do you think
Sure.
that that's a possibility for some races?
There are, again, just like people, there are races and individuals within those races who you may consider to be benevolent or malevolent. I feel like we are in a situation now where we are only dealing with benevolent entities. My personal experience has told me that. I have never had a negative experience. I have talked to some people who have, and I feel blessed to have had such early experiences and have always been kind of interested in this topic and not afraid of these things, that I just tend to take things in stride. And yes, there are absolutely races of ETs who, it's not that they don't have our best interest at heart, we're just not in their project. They may just be looking at like the fun guy or doing something with the trees, and we're just outside of their experiment altogether.
We've had people ask us before, you're twins, have you ever had a similar experience? I have not had any experiences that I know about that are ET related. I have had experiences that can't really explain in reality. I've had experiences with what I would consider to be spirits that's still here, or a ghost. You can guess that's the easiest term people can relate to. And it wasn't just me who experienced it. There were two other people with me in broad daylight in the middle of the day who had experienced the exact same thing. I'm just the kind of person that I just feel like anything and everything is possible. And I think one of the things that is going to help humanity as this transition happens, because I've heard you talk a lot about open contact. Maybe just the whole idea of not discounting other people's experiences. Even though I've not had any direct experiences like you have had with ETs, I have had supernatural experiences. Even though there is a part of me that says, I don't believe you. The other part of me says, well, I have to believe you because I've had experiences that I can't explain. And so I know that, quote, we're not alone. I know that this human experience is not the only experience. I think it's really important as we go through these different episodes and discussions that we have, it's just modeling in a way to help other people have conversations that are productive and understanding and non-judgmental and just open-minded. We'll see if I have an experience with an ET before open contact. I mean, I would welcome it. I've had dreams that I feel like, are really trying to tap into something that is outside of a human experience. And sometimes that is a sort of ET type experience. So if you're listening, I'm open and I do feel safe because you feel safe. That helps me feel safe. I think that's one of the things that we will talk about when we get more into open contact. And I know you'll encourage people to sort of drop their fears and let that go because that can really hinder open contact.
Fear is going to be, other than people just questioning life and everything that they know, their feeling of physical fear of harm to themselves and their family is going to be very, very real. And I am here to reassure you, do not be afraid. In future episodes, we'll get into some more detail about some of my more recent experiences of very up close and personal, where I did not have fear and how I dealt with that. They help with that. They can kind of tap into our energetic field and provide this vibration that we can choose to match or not. It's kind of like just how a doctor can use anesthesia on you. A medication can cause your body to react in a certain way. They have their technology as well that we cannot even fathom right now. It's going to be a matter of us just noticing our fear and realizing that if they were here to harm us, they would have done that so long ago.
Yeah, I think one of the things we'll have to overcome fear-wise is not so much a fear of them, but a fear of other humans.
Yes.
And what their reactions may be. And we've heard Bashar talk about, during open contact, the ships will come over the coastlines. And so people can sort of gather and witness and watch and see for themselves. My first thought to you was like, I'm not going to the beach because there'll be people there with guns wanting to shoot down the ship. You're talking to me about drop your fear and it doesn't have to be that way. And we create our own reality. I think that's something we'll have to overcome. And hopefully ETs can help us figure out how to overcome that fear of just our fellow human and what their reaction might be. We'll see.
The more you can do to refine yourself and do that reflection and that inner work, any huge new jarring experience is going to be going a lot more smoothly for you, whether it's ET showing up in the sky or whatever it is.
Building that resilience.
Yeah, building that mental resilience, that emotional resilience. And it's just all about having power over yourself. And it's okay to have fear creep up. It's okay. Like, feel all the feelings. Okay. Feel all the feelings. And I wanted to mention one thing too before we wrap up is this is for a global audience. We are based in the US and we are based in Arkansas, which if you're not familiar, it's like south central of the country. We're very rural. We're called the natural state because we have so many parks and lakes, and we have the largest continuous deposit of quartz crystal in the world. And so there's a lot of natural resources here. People have had a lot of experiences with a lot of paranormal things, not just ETs, but Sasquatch. We'll probably do a whole episode on that. You can see my little Sasquatch here in the back. This is a really good place for kind of us to be planted, I think.
There's a unique energy field here.
Definitely. Lots of portals around and magnetic energy and frequencies. But we do plan to sometimes talk about experiences from people, or we'll have guests on that live in Arkansas that have had these experiences, and you can hear their stories and maybe relate to them, because my whole deal is it doesn't matter if people believe me or not. It makes me feel so good to be able to talk to others about this. And I know that there are other people out there that have something that they're hiding. I've tried to get stories from people and say, like, what have you had? What have you experienced? I've gotten so many different experiences. And most of the time, these people don't want me to use their name. They don't want me to know where they live, where they work, or anything, because They feel like they're going to really, really be judged.
Right.
So,
It's funny that fear of the other
yeah.
human just it really holds us back to being not just being our true selves, but to sharing with others these unique, life-changing experiences. And if there was more of that, people wouldn't look at you and be like, "You're crazy." It would
Right.
just be more
Normal.
normal,
Yeah.
right?
Well, and used to, and even still to this day, you could lose your job. People could, especially depending on how old you are, your parents might try to put you on some type of medication or,
Send you to anti-alien camp.
whatever. I get that. I do always offer people, if there's nobody else you can talk to, you can always talk to me. I will not judge you. I will listen to you. I will give you advice if you want it. So definitely reach out to me, groundedgalactic@gmail.com. I'd be more than happy to speak with you. Also, from an Arkansas perspective, I have a Facebook page called Arkansas UFO and ET Investigations. ArcUFO is the profile picture, and I just donate my time to do investigations, whether it's a sighting in the sky or they've had a more personal experience. I will talk to them and help them try to figure it out, and we just go from there. And I love doing that. I love talking to people about this because it can be very life altering.
Mm-hmm. Wow, so many other questions. So many other
I'm
things
sure.
to talk about in future episodes.
What do we want to leave the audience with? What are our big questions that we are going to present to them?
I think my big question would be going back to this mental and emotional resilience that is always good to build regardless of what may come. I think that will be my big sort of prompting question for our audience is how can you integrate one new practice into your daily life or one weekly to-do that you do that helps you to build that resilience, not just for open contact or extraterrestrial or supernatural experiences that you may, at this point, fear may happen, but all the other things that may happen in life death of a family member, loss of a job, a war breaks out. How can you build that mental and emotional resilience in your life?
Okay, so my big question is, if you've never had any experience like this, or maybe you consider yourself a skeptic in the ET realm of things, I challenge you to ask yourself, well, what if it was true? What if they do exist? And then just think about what that might mean for your life. So the more you maybe attempt to prepare yourself, the better.
Good job. I learned so much.
Awesome.
Super.
Thank you for joining us and listening about my experience. Again, reach out to me, groundedgalactic@gmail.com. I'd love to talk to you about your experience.
Word.